Thank you. From how about Mount Sinai?
Testing.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to our Rotary Club meeting, Rotary Club of Hudson meeting dated March 6, 2024. I'm Tom Tobin. I'm your designated Sergeant of Arms today. Ron Strobel is out of town for a few weeks, so I'm filling in. Believe me, I have the authority for this job, so you will respect it. Okay, I would like to call up Rich Warfield to give us an invocation this morning. Rich, here's a microphone.
Thank you, Brother Tom, brother from another mother. Good morning. Good morning to everyone in the audience here. Let us bow our heads and thank the Lord for our blessings. Lord God, thank you for this day with these men and women. Bless Tom and his duties as interim president or interim sergeant of arms, Bless Terry and her job today as president and all the people that participate in the club meetings. And Lord, we pray for those people that are struggling and people that are getting wounded and even killed. Lord, please put your hedge of protection over them. And thank you for this food, for those people that are going to participate in the food. Let it nourish our bodies. Thank you for this time once again with these men and women. God bless you. Amen.
Thank you, brother. All right, and if I could call Doug McDowell up to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Be careful. All right, here we go.
Should I use? I got it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test. Hey, number one.
Is it true?
Number two.
Is it fair to all concerned?
Number three.
Will it develop better friendships?
And number four.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Good job.
Done.
All right. Doug pinched hit in the last minute. Good job. All right, and let's all give a warm welcome to our president, Terry Bortnick. That's right. A warm welcome.
Today. Morning, everybody. Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning, guests. We're happy to have you here. Just a few housekeeping memos. We do have a board of directors meeting after the meeting today. Remember, we're changing for the time being anyway to the first week of the month rather than the second. The gala committee will meet again on Friday, the 15th. We met last Friday, and so we're still on a 2-week meeting rotation. Things are coming along very well. Marilyn's out this week at a girls' weekend with her family, I think. So, but everything's moving along very, very well with that. So more to update you on that soon. Did somebody have a question? Yeah, on a girls' weekend. Donations this month are to Grace House. Grace House is the facility that is located in Akron, and they assist as a caregiver for those in hospice care who have no one to join them or take care of them, and they don't have family or anybody. So it's a really good beneficiary. So what they really need are gift cards to any local grocery stores so that they can replenish their pantry and get what they need as they need it for those in need. They also can always use postage stamps. Not sure what but they need postage stamps. So that's an easy one to offer up. Okay, I do want to remind everybody also about the annual district meeting, 6630 meeting at the Sheraton in Cuyahoga Falls. That is on the 25th and 26th of April. Rich will be there, and it would be great. Anybody who can, you don't have to participate in both days. You can stop in when you have some time. They have a lot of good speakers, right, Rich? And a lot of good stuff going on down there that might benefit you. Go ahead, James. Or okay.
Just a really quick question. So for each month, we have these wonderful charities. If we do bring something in, who do we actually give it to? Okay, very good.
I make sure everything gets there. And if you're making a monetary donation at the end of the month, I go shopping for whatever it is they need. And then typically my husband winds up being the deliverer because he's out on the road a lot. So we get it there to whatever the beneficiary for that month is.
Does he have a little Subaru also?
What?
Does he have a little Subaru also when he delivers?
No. No.
You know what to say about that district meeting? I think Pat.
Your mic's not on. Is it? Oh,
I think Pat's gonna be there too, no? He's on the board. He's a big shot on the board. I'll be working that weekend as your incoming district treasurer, so I have to be there the whole weekend. So
okay.
love to have company.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna try to get there at least one of the days. It's the 25th and 26th of April at the Sheraton, right there on the river in Cuyahoga Falls. So easy to get to for us. Okay? I do not. Rich, times? Oh, okay, I will.
I believe it's Friday. Joe and everybody else, I don't know if it starts first thing in the morning. I haven't checked, but I think Pat around noon, maybe
Starts Friday
through Saturday evening. And it's not a Sunday event. It's Friday around noon through Saturday.
Okay,
So once again, like Terry said, stop on in.
okay. Well, you know what? I'll get more detailed information for you for next week. I'll get some specifics for you for next week so that we can share that with you. One other thing I wanted to make mention of also is don't forget next week we have our four-way speech contest. I spoke with Jim yesterday and apparently the high school has something going on next week that they've asked if we could put it off to the following week. I will get those of you who have signed up more information on that because that may determine whether you can still do that or not. And I'll have to send out another sign up sheet if that's the case. But he was going to get back to me on that. Sharif had called and asked if it would be possible to put the Hudson speech contest off a week, but I don't have more details yet, but I will get that for you. And then Western Reserve is Tuesday, March 12th for those of you signed up. And again, I'll send out a reminder for you. Don't forget, you're going to be having dinner there too. If you signed up for Western Reserve, they would like you to join them for dinner and then listen to the speeches. Okay. All right. And with that, I will pass this along to Mimi. Are you introducing today? Okay. Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Go, ma'am.
Are you coming? Yeah, I didn't know. It just ran right there. I'm very pleased to introduce, I'm going to come out because you can't see and maybe not hear. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Joe Ortiz. He's a professor of earth sciences at Kent State University. And he will be the incoming chair of earth sciences when the academic calendar turns over early this summer. He has a PhD in oceanography from the College of Earth, Oceans, and Atmospheric Sciences at Oregon State University, and an honors graduate from Brown University's aquatic science program. He completed his postdoc work at Columbia University's Earth Observatory prior to beginning his career at KSU, I think in 2001. So he'd been around this part of the country for a while, and we forgive him from being from Long Island. Yes. His expertise is in climate change, environmental remote sensing, energy resources, and sedimentary geology. And he has also been known to chase algae. His CV is 54 pages long. Universities get into stuff like that. I'm not going to read it. But I did review it. And I can tell you that he's been extraordinarily productive as a scientist, not only with his research and contributions to his fields, but he's also an excellent mentor. And he has been a good exhibit of what professors are expected to do. It's called teaching, research, and service to the institution and to the outside world. In his work at the university, which doesn't, it's not something you'd automatically think about, but in his service, he has been the Presidential Fellow for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Kent State, and he provides continuing advice for the campus-wide sustainability plan committee. To the benefit of Hudson, he chairs the city's Environmental Awareness Committee and has been a valuable contributor to the climate work group that's been investigating climate impacts and opportunities in Hudson for the last 5-6 years. Joe has lived in Hudson with his wife and raised 2 children who are graduates of Hudson High School. And when he comes up for air and does some recreational things, he likes to hike, outdoor photography. I know that he's a kind of a birder too. And he's known as an early adopter of energy efficient technologies in his own personal journey towards sustainability. He's an amazing amount of data and knowledge about efficiencies and cost savings of contemporary technology that enables our transition from fossil fuels to renewables. And lucky for us, he's willing to share both data and lessons learned. So without going on for the rest of the 54 pages, I'm going to give this to Joe.
All right. Thank you very much, Mimi, for that warm welcome. And it's a pleasure to be here to speak before the Rotarians. You know, I really enjoy coming to these events. It's the second time that I've spoken before you. And your 4 tests really resonate with me. And so I hope as I'm talking today, you'll see how they tie in to the topic that we have for discussion today. So my title today is Energy Sustainability in the EAC. So as Mimi mentioned, I'm the chair of the Environmental Awareness Committee here in Hudson. And so what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit. We're going to start out with the EAC, even though they're listed last here. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the programs that we're doing to try and benefit citizens in Hudson. And then from there, I'm going to talk about the bigger picture of why we should care about environment and what we can do about it, right? Specifically looking at the climate parts of this. So I start out with 2 images here of things that we can do to make a difference from a sustainability standpoint. And so on the left are the heat pumps for the new city hall, right? So these are Daikin heat pumps. They're extremely efficient. Daikin makes heat pumps that operate down to -5 degrees, which is wonderful because as you'll see, that can cover most of the temperature range of what we see here in Northeast Ohio. And the other is my Kia Niro, right? So that's me charging it in my garage. Very convenient. I charge once to twice a week, a little bit more if I go for a long trip, and that covers everything that I need to do for my travels. So next slide, please. And as we mentioned, I'm the chair of the EAC. We have a body that consists of 7 individuals. We just filled out an open spot that was on it with the help of the city council, who makes all the appointments. We serve 4-year terms. You can serve up to 3 consecutive 4-year terms, then you have to bow out before you can reapply. And as you see, there's a little bit of information for me, and I'm very pleased to announce that I have been elected or appointed as the chair of the next EAC, and I'm next Department of Earth Sciences at Kent State, and I'm looking forward to that position as well. All right, next slide, please. So some of the things that we're working on in the EAC, our big project that we're just starting to get off the ground is the Green Certification Registry Program. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in detail. We also run environmental awareness campaigns and education campaigns and outreach. And so speaking to you about the kinds of things that we do for the environment is one of the ways that we do our outreach. So I'm going to focus on the Green Certification Registry, which is now live. Next slide, please. And so you can go to the permitting portal for the city of Hudson and get the forms that you need in order to fill out this program. And the idea is to encourage individuals to put in sustainability features in their home that will help them to use less energy and save money. And I'm going to give you some examples to show how that works today. The way it works is you partner with a third-party vendor in order to have a certification done in your home. There's a number of different programs that we've recommended. One of them that's probably the easiest to start with and the most set up to go with right now is called Green Door. It's an online DIY app that you use that's available through a program called Pearl Certification. And what's nice about that program is that it walks you through the process. You upload information about the features that you have in your home, and then one of their professionals will score those and tell you where your home sits on that scale of sustainability and make recommendations of future things that you could do. Next slide, please. And so some of the advantages that you can get through doing this is greater visibility for the homes in Hudson that are energy sustainable and have that added benefit to the community. And so, for example, we hold the historic registry as well, so that people can proudly proclaim that their house is original and has historic value. In the same way, we see the Green Certification Registry as showing how we can have those buildings that also have sustainability features to them as well. So next slide. We are the first city in the state of Ohio that has a program like this, right? There are programs like this in other states, but we are the first in the state, which is great because it shows the leadership that we have. And so in addition to that, independent studies have shown that adding these kinds of features can increase the resale value of your home by 3 to 5.5% or so. And in addition to that, depending on what you put in, they can also, of course, help you save money in your day-to-day living. So thank you. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea, here are the different programs that we're partnering with in order to provide this opportunity. So individuals would go out and find the type of program that they were interested in based on what their needs were or interests, and then use that to fill out a third-party certification, which would then be filed with the city. So next slide. And just to compare these, we selected from a matrix of different programs so that people would be available if they wanted to do this on their own, if they wanted to make use of a government sponsored program or a government related program, or if they preferred to work with a private sector individual, if they were doing remodeling, new construction, or working on an existing home. Now, some of these could also be used across those different boundaries, but this is a guide to help you figure out which ones you might want to look at. Okay, so next one, please. And the kinds of reports that you would get would look like this. So this is an example of the ResNet report on the left, or part of it, and part of the DOE Home Energy Score. So one of the advantages of the DOE Home Energy Score is that it gives you a simple energy score rating that you could then compare against other homes if you're looking to buy a home in the area, or that provide a ranking of your home compared to other ones that are on the market. And of course, they also tell you if you did additional improvements, what your savings would be for those on an annual basis. Okay, next slide. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about our flagship event that we're working on. So we're getting ready for Earth Day this year. Earth Day, we're very pleased to say, is going to be back on the main green. It's going to be on the gazebo and clock tower greens this year. We've done that to provide for greater traffic in the area and to allow people to take advantage of the wonderful restaurants that we have downtown so that you can have lunch and then come to the event, or go to the event, grab some lunch, and then come back again. It's going to be in the afternoon from 11 to 3 p.m. And it should be a lot of fun. There's going to be a DJ and all kinds of interesting vendors to see, and we'll have an EV car show right in front of the Old Town Hall. So please come on down, and I'm sure Petals will be happy to say hello to you when you get there. Okay, so next slide. So why do we care about this, right? Well, one of the reasons to care about this is because of the fact that we live in a forced climate, right? The activities that we do as a society and overall as humanity is adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, which are causing the planet to warm. Right. And so this is a record from European sources that was published by the Financial Times in 1940 to present, that shows the daily averages as the red dots, the blue and red dots, and then the black line is the 12-month running average from that. And so the point that they wanted to make with this plot is that we have crossed the 1.5 degree threshold on an annual basis for the first time. If you look at the data there, you can see that on a daily basis, we had in fact crossed 1.5 degree earlier several times, but this is the first time that the planet has crossed the 1.5 degree barrier, which the IPCC and other climate scientists say is potentially threatening and problematic, right? So the more we keep burning fossil fuels, the more warming is going to happen on the planet, right? So we haven't crossed the barrier permanently yet, right? There's still time to decrease emissions and shift things back down. And one of the things that's been a really exciting result of recent climate studies is the realization that if we do stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere, if we reach net zero, then the planet will start to warm quickly because its ecosystems will take up carbon in such a way that it will decrease the atmospheric forcing, which will then start to revert us back down to a cooler climate. And if you take a look at where we are in 2023, you can see that almost half of the year, right, days were warmer than 1.5 degree on average. And this is a global average, right? It's not regional, right? There are 5 major programs that keep track of temperature. This was the warmest of the 5. The coolest put the planet at about 1.3, 1.35 degrees. There were 3 that had it either at or above 1.5. Okay, so that's the climate story. I'm not going to belabor this because I think there's lots of information on it, and I spent a lot of time talking about it last time. Okay, so next slide is what we can do about it, right? And so this is a slide that I showed last time that I've updated a little bit. I used to have a Prius hybrid on here. I made that slide about 6 or 7 years ago. I've updated it to show a Hyundai Ioniq 6, which is a fully electric vehicle that gets 360 miles electric range on some of its configurations and takes less than 18 minutes to charge. Yeah, right. So we have the technology to do this, and that car sells for less than $50,000. Right, before tax credits, right? So next slide, please. Whoops, that's the wrong way. And so, in fact, there's a whole fleet of vehicles now from multiple makers that are fast charging, right? So these cars will put on 13 to 20 miles per minute in DC fast charging. They'll charge in 18 to 20 minutes from 20% to 80% charge. And many of them have mileage range ratings between 300 and 360 miles, right? So next slide. And one of the things that's been shown in recent studies, this is from 2022, it's now costs less to charge an EV in all 50 states of the union, right? That includes Hawaii, right? Where you have to import your fuel and so on, right? So in every state in the United States, you can now drive an EV for less than it costs you to drive an internal combustion engine or ICE or gasoline or diesel car, right? So if you switch to an electric car, you will save money, right? So next slide, please. And part of the reason that this is happening is because batteries are improving. And so this shows the trend in battery cost over the time frame from the 1990s to 2024. Right, over that time frame, the cost of large batteries has decreased by 99%. Right, so this year it's at about $130 to $140 per kilowatt hour, which is a measure of the energy that you can put into that battery. CATL and BYD have announced that within the next 6 months, they're going to be cutting their prices down to about $56 per kilowatt hour. So they're going to cut it in half within the next year or so, right? And so you can see the so-called learning curve, right? The rate at which we're decreasing the price of batteries has been very steep. In the earlier part, the learning curve was about 19% per year. And in more recent years, it's dropped to 29%. And in fact, if you were to make that calculation over a shorter time period towards the end, it would be a steeper decline than 29%. And so the learning curve is a measure of the cost as a function of the total amount of units that have been sold or deployed. And so what this is, it's a measure of economy of scale, right? I'm sure we're familiar with this, right? In this business community. As you build out more and more, you become better at what you're doing. And so those translates into decreases in costs because of the efficiency. Or you've paid off the equipment that you were using to do that. And so you get profit from the additional units that you're generating. Okay, next slide. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is EVs have now reached price parity with internal combustion engine cars. Right, so notice that the cost of EVs is dropping, the cost of internal combustion cars is increasing, right? Because it becomes increasingly complex to build these vehicles because less people are buying them. And as a result of that, we see this shift, right? And that's happening here in Ohio as well, right? So for example, if you look at the total number of alternative fuel vehicles that are being bought in Ohio, right? EVs, fully electric, battery electric cars are outselling hybrids 3-to-1 in Ohio, right? So the future is going to be electric, right? And what I tell people is if you're buying an internal combustion engine car or a hybrid, you're buying a stranded asset, right? Because the infrastructure that you need for those vehicles is going to go away. Right? And it's already cheaper to drive an EV. So why not? Okay, next slide. And in fact, I mentioned that there are now multiple EVs on the market that have ranges of 300 miles or greater on a single charge. And part of the reason that this is happening is because of the improvement in the energy density of the batteries. Right? So specific energy of a battery is the amount of energy you can put per unit mass, right? So kilowatt hours per kilogram, right? If you look at where we are, there are now commercial batteries that are shipping at about 400 kilowatt hours per kilogram, and there are research grade batteries at 700 kilowatt hours per kilogram, right? Which is huge. For each doubling of that, you increase the range. Right, so the vehicles that I showed you that had a range of 300 miles, they were doing that with battery energy densities about 250 to 300 kilowatt hours. Right, so a battery with 700 kilowatt hours would have over 600 miles range. Right, probably more than that. Right, So depending on how, and so that gives you flexibility, right? You can use a smaller battery in order to get a reasonable range and deliver a car for less cost, right? So lots of options. And with the faster charging capabilities that you have now, we're going to see differentiation where some companies will say, well, we'll put a smaller battery in, but we'll let it charge really fast. Or we'll see some companies that will say, well, we want this to be our top end flagship model. So it's going to charge really fast and it's going to have a big battery that's going to let it go for a very long range. So those trade-offs are really gone in terms of the advantage of having an internal combustion engine because you could fuel it quickly. Okay, next slide, please. And another question that people are concerned about is, where will I charge my EV? Well, 99% of your charging, or a very large fraction of your charging, generally happens at home, right? I could charge my car on 120 volt electricity. In fact, I did that for the first month that I owned it, and I would just charge it every 3 days in order to have enough energy in the battery to do what I needed to do. If I need to go on a long trip, I could charge it on a DC fast charger somewhere, right? But then we installed a charge port in our home, in our garage, 240 volt charge. That system lets me charge once a week. And that meets all my needs for my daily commute, because my daily commute is 20 miles and my car has a range of 220 to 300 miles in the summertime, 220 in the winter, right? But the EV infrastructure is growing very rapidly. The rate at which we're now adding new charging ports nationwide is so fast that we're putting on the equivalent of the Tesla network every single year, right? So range anxiety and a fear of not being able to find a place to charge is going to be a thing of the past. Okay. So next slide, please. Did you get it? Okay. So that was what we were seeing with the charging infrastructure and the EVs. Another question that's come up that people are concerned about is, well, if we're putting all these electric devices, they're going to use more electricity. Is that going to strain the grid, right? In the past year, a study after the addition of 1.5 million EVs nationwide showed that there was not, in fact, not a strain on the grid. Right, reliability was not impacted by that. Excuse me. And part of the reason that's happening is because we keep adding new capacity. So what's shown here is from the EIA short-term energy outlook, right? And so on the left is capacity. So this is the total amount of generation capacity that's available in the US. And you can see that we have a lot of natural gas generation capacity, much more than the other sources that we hear. But what you can see is the rate at which we're building out wind and solar and battery storage are the only parts of the grid that are growing, right? We're getting rid of our coal-fired power plants because they're much more expensive to operate and they're older, they're aging. And so they're being replaced with new, better technology that is much faster to put in place and allows us to get energy for much less, right? Wind and solar are the cheapest ways that we can make electricity now. And so if you look on the right, what that shows is the generation, right? So the top is the total fossil fuel generation, so the combination of gas and coal, and you can see that it's trending downwards, right? The purple is the nuclear power that's generated. You can see that it's flat. The green line at the bottom is wind, water, solar combined, and you can see that it's increasing and approaching the fossil fuel. If we add wind, water, solar plus nuclear as clean, meaning low carbon, you can see that we're approaching much faster the rate at which fossil fuels are decreasing. The other thing to look at is the difference in proportion between the generation capacity and what's actually being generated is not 1-to-1, right? If we were really using all of that fossil fuel generation capacity, it should be blowing the renewables out of the water, And in fact, it's not. And the reason why is because the grid is structured such that the cheapest way of generating electricity is gone to first to make the power, right? It's much cheaper to make power from wind, water, solar than it is from fossil fuels. And so as a result of that, they're displacing fossil fuels, right? Coal is being displaced by gas, and gas and coal are being displaced by wind, water, solar. And now we're seeing battery storage start to come online as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so that's sort of the big picture. Now, what can we do ourselves in order to take advantage of these things? And what this shows, as Mimi was mentioning, I'm an early adopter. So back in 2006, we were already starting to make changes in our household, what we were doing in order to take advantage of this. So we switched over to compact fluorescent batteries, lights, when they became available. And then we switched over from compact fluorescents to LEDs when they became available. We bought an instrument called a kilowatt, which you plug into an outlet, and then you can plug something into it and it tells you how much energy it's using. Right? We did that, and we saw that our coffee pot was using as much energy as our microwave. Right? We had a simple glass carafe with a heating plate beneath it. So we took that, donated to Goodwill, got rid of it, replaced it with a coffee pot that brewed coffee hotter, right? And then stored the coffee in an insulated thermos, right? A carafe. And so my wife is the coffee drinker in our house, but she swears that it makes much better coffee because you get a better roast extraction and it keeps it warm without spending all that extra money, right? We were just basically throwing money out the window. It'd be like opening a window in your house in the middle of winter, just because, right? So we did that. Then we switched to front loading washer dryers, and you can see that we were able to cut our total energy use by about 50% at that time, right? So all of those investments saved us money, right? And it's been saving us money for the better part of a decade. Okay, so next slide. What I've started doing now is going after the last of the big stuff in our home, right? So I've replaced our gas stove with an induction stove. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And this past November, we took our air conditioner, right, which was original to the home. Our home is about 23 years old or so, built in 1998. I think it's 23, right? So we got rid of, actually it's older than that, right? So we replaced the air conditioner outside, which was aging. It wasn't properly configured for the home when the home was built, and it was run with an obsolete refrigerant, which we couldn't replace if it failed, right? Because that refrigerant was banned a couple of years ago because of the fact that it's a very, very potent greenhouse gas. So we figure we got to get rid of this at some point. Why don't we get rid of it now, right? So we took out that exterior AC unit, replaced it with this heat pump, right? This Bosch heat pump, which I think looks like a Star Wars droid, looks like a Gonk droid, right? So it sits up there in its little snow feet, right, on the new pad that they put in place for it. And it helps us to keep our home warm without generating fossil fuel emissions, right? And our backup, what we did was we took our existing gas furnace, we turned that into our backup heat source, right? And so it's still there, right? And you can see that's the combination of the internal coils for the heat pump and the furnace. And then we put in a nice big April air filter to reduce the flow friction within the house so that we get better circulation. We did some other things for to seal up as many of the gaps in the pipes as we could, in the ducts as we could find and so on. And so this is what it did for us. So what I've shown in the bottom is the amount of gas energy we were using in black and the amount of electricity that we were using in gray, right? What I did was I took the gas energy and I converted from MCF, thousands of cubic feet of gas, to kilowatts, so we can compare them one to one, right? And there's a conversion factor for doing that. And you can see that our electricity use went up because now we have an electric heat pump, but our gas use went down by a huge amount because the heat pump is much more efficient than the gas furnace. The gas furnace, even though it's a high efficiency furnace, had between 95 and 97% efficiency. Well, our heat pump has an efficiency that ranges from 200% to 400%, depending on the outside temperature. This is an air source heat pump. So we end up winning because of that, right? You hear horror stories about people saying, oh, I switched to a heat pump and now I'm spending hundreds of dollars extra per year, right? Well, if you configure your heat pump right, that doesn't happen, right? So far, through the entire winter, which was going to be our big heating budget for the year, as you can see from this, we spent an average $13 a month more on the combined cost of the heat pump operating and the gas backup furnace. In fact, our gas backup furnace only ran for about 35 hours this winter total, right? So next slide, please. And you can see this is the operating for that. So the red line is our internal temperature. The blue line at the top is the outside temperature. And you can see that outside temperature is going up and down, and our indoor temperature stayed at the set point of 67 plus or minus 1 degrees. And the blue curve at the very top is how much of the heat operation was coming from the heat pump as opposed to the gas furnace. And so even during the cold snap that we had in January, we still were getting 60% or more of our energy from the heat pump, right? So the gas backup is just doing that. It's backing up. It's not taking over 100%, right? So next slide. And in fact, we sized the system so that it won't go to 100% gas until we get down to 0 degrees, right? Well, out here in Northeast Ohio, we get about 15 to 30 days per year that are below 15 degrees, and very few that are colder than 0 degrees. So by doing this, we were able to put in a system that maximized our emissions reduction for sort of a sweet point in terms of the capital investment. If we had instead invested in a heat pump that would go down to, say, -5 degrees or to -15 degrees, it would have doubled the initial capital investment. We instead got a heat pump that would go to 15 degrees, and that let us cut our capital investment by 50%, roughly, based on the quotes that I've seen from others. Okay, so next slide. And so this is our emissions reduction. The brown curve shows what we were using in terms of emissions from all the gas that we were burning before we switched on the heat pump. Once we switched on the heat pump, you can see that 3 of the 4 months have been at the baseline level for gas use. And that baseline now is determined by our hot water heater, which is a gas hot water heater, right? So our next plan is going to be to swap out the gas hot water heater. When we do that, we'll probably be down to about 5 to 10% of our initial emissions from historically. Okay, so next slide. So that was all great and helped keep us warm, and it gave me some interesting things to play around with plotting, because everybody knows you need spreadsheets to keep track of your HVAC system. But as a scientist, I also like to track everything. And so this is our Christmas dinner, right? So for Christmas dinner, traditionally, I make a Puerto Rican roast pork, right? And so this is pernil, and it's pernil with the skin on, right? And so you get this crispy, we call it cuerito. It's like bacon, right? And so the way I crisped this up was at the very last 5 minutes or so, I put it up to 425 on our induction heat pump, and it was cracking like popcorn in it. It was awesome. This is crackling, right? You might hear it. Okay, and so while I was doing this, I was tracking the temperature on this, because it was the first time that we cooked the pernil in our new induction and convection oven. And so now we have it dialed in. We know exactly what we're going to do next year. And part of the reason I did this is because I'm a crazy science geek, but also it's because an induction stove has much more energy output than a standard gas appliance. This puts out 45,000 BTU equivalent, right? The stove that we pulled out put about 18 or 20, right? In addition to that, the big selling point for my wife that I was able to convince her to do this is look at that beautiful ceramic top, right? So that is really easy to clean, right? And so she's like, sold, we're getting it, right? So it heats water very fast, and it just does a great job cooking. All right, so the one thing you have to be willing to adjust is to realize that your cooking time is going to decrease on some of your recipes because it has so much more power. not such a bad thing in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so next slide. We're getting close to the end, right? So, so in addition to all these things that you can do personally, there's now federal incentives to do this, right? So there's billions of dollars that are now available to make this transition in terms of EVs. Next slide. And to state and local government as well as individuals through the Inflation Reduction Act. So billions of dollars that are already being distributed to states to convert over to electric school buses, right? That are being distributed to communities to make use of support for people that are of lower income to support them. And there are tax credits that are available for people who are better off, right? So for the heat pump that we put in, we're getting back $2,000 on our purchase price, right? You can get back 30% or $2,000, whichever is more on that, depending on the higher bracket. For individuals in lower tax brackets, you can get up to 80% of the cost of the improvement. So next slide. So what can we do, right? There are lots of things we can do. You can start out with the easy stuff like we did, which is to weather strip your home, to replace your windows. That was the other thing we did, right? Last year's project was replacing all the windows so that we have now high efficiency windows, which decreases the heat loss, right? So for example, yesterday, we went 24 hours without turning our HVAC on at all, and the house was 72 degrees because we opened the curtains and let the sunshine in, right? So our house is so well insulated that it can do that now, right? You can switch over to electric groundskeeping equipment, right? I do my lawn using an electric lawnmower. It costs me 50 cents to mow my lawn now. I don't have to worry about oil changes ever. How many of you hate changing the oil on your electric, on your gas lawnmower, right? You potentially spill it all over the place and then you got to figure out how to get rid of it. I don't have to do that, right? I just plug it in and it goes, right? Okay, so you can upgrade your home to have a power plug, a 240-volt power plug in the garage so that you can then plug in your EV when you buy one, right? And it will be there as a selling point for when you sell your home. Okay, next slide. And so to summarize this, fossil fuels are getting more expensive. Electricity is getting better in terms of being able to provide service and is not increasing anywhere near at the rate at which fossil fuels are increasing in cost. There are incentives to help you make that transition now because the hard part is the capital cost, but it is affordable, right? So I make about the average income here in Hudson, and I've been able to do what I've done, you know, what I showed you here, okay? And I'm helping to put one of my two kids through college, right? We put our other kid already through college as well, right? Okay, next slide. And so with that, I'll leave you with this photo that I took on one of my trips. This is a photograph of sunset in Val Dam in South Africa, one of the places that I'm working to do studies of harmful algal blooms. So thank you very much. I hope I left some time for questions this time. I checked. Last year I had 45 slides, so I cut it down to 30, right?
Thank you. A lot to think about. So one question I have is, you know, been thinking about getting EV. And as you talk about, you know, technology improving with economies of scale, it's always like, when exactly do you jump in? So I have actually two questions. One is it possible, if the battery technology gets better, is it possible to swap out the battery in your car, or do you really need to get the next car to do that? And then secondly, one thing that was concerning, when we did have the cold snap, there were reports that the EV batteries were running, you know, which is true of most batteries, is when it gets very cold, they don't retain the electricity as long. So if you could speak to both of those.
Great questions. So all of those are easy to answer, right? So when is the right time to consider jumping in? Well, I showed you that EVs are now basically at price parity with internal combustion engines. So I would say now is the time to do it because there's no cost difference or very little cost difference. And in terms of concern with the batteries, my Kia Niro EV, which is an entry-level EV, comes with a 10-year, 100,000 mile warranty on my battery, right? Which is the same that I would get on the powertrain. I know people who have EVs that are still on their original battery after 14 years, right? So the reliability of the vehicles is there. Can you swap out your battery if you need to? Yes. It would, if you do it under warranty, it would cost you nothing. If you have to do it without the warranty, you saw that the cost of the batteries have dropped by 99%. So for me to swap out the battery on my EV now would cost about $3,000, which is, you know, it's a high, but that's like the cost of replacing the engine in your car, about 3,000. Yeah, that's not that bad, right? So EV technologies are maturing. They're here. You would look great in an Ioniq 6, guaranteed, right? 360-mile range. It will look good. So was there another question or was that? Oh, yeah, the cold. Yeah. So my vehicle, which has moderate battery conditioning on it, I get 220 miles range in the wintertime. I get 295 in the summertime. And so what I do is in the winter, instead of charging it to 80%, I charge it to 90%. And then I never notice a difference. And I charge it twice a week rather than once a week. So it's a non-issue from my standpoint. It's true that the current generation of EV batteries do lose some energy during the wintertime because of their electrolytes. Their electrolytes are more sluggish in the winter. And so they lose about 30% of their range in the wintertime. But generally, people don't need all that range anyway, because our average commute is less than 20 miles, right? So it means if you're going on a long trip, you would just charge a little bit more frequently. The next generation of batteries that are coming along are going to be sodium-based. They're already shipping sodium-based batteries. They will have no winter degradation because salt has as an electrolyte is not affected by the cold, and they'll be solid state, or many of them will be solid state. So that's I don't think as big a problem as people have tried to make it sound like in the media. And a more expensive EV that has a better battery management system would pre-charge the battery before you got to where you're going to fast charge it, so you wouldn't see as much of a drop in the charging time.
Thank you for the presentation. I've gone on the journey with Joe about getting a heat pump and can say it really is fantastic. The other comment I want to make is that, you know, I have loved my gas stove for many years. I've always just loved it, but I decided to switch to the induction. And I have to say, I love it just as much. One of the things, the only drawback is that it has that it's a glass top and you have to be careful not to drop things on it, or you can scratch it easily. They now make something that they're silicone mats that you can put on top of it and can prevent all of that. So they're really working on trying to make it user friendly. I live in a historic house. It lets the warm out, I mean, it's like a sieve. I did get what's called a blower test at Joe's recommendation, and I'll be working on trying to patch it up a little bit, but it is harder if you have a really old house.
No, that's a good point. And you know, the key thing that she was mentioning is doing a blower door test so you could figure out what your heating load is. Because once you know what your heating load is, that lets you determine how much of a heat pump you need to buy in order to meet your needs. So I'm happy to talk to you about sealing on your home, and we can have a sealing party and try and seal some of those ducts and things. Thank you.
Quick question, not that I'm shopping for one, but it sounds interesting on electric cars. Two questions, actually. I'm being like James Field. The cost of car insurance for an electric car versus a gas, can you comment on if there's a difference there? And then the second thing is just from reading, and we all know everything we read in life is true, but it talks about the electric cars sales being down 20%. I don't know if that's compared to last year or the year before, but maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, so two questions. One, does it cost more to insure and register an EV? From an insurance standpoint, we haven't noticed a big difference. We have one EV and one gas car still. That's on our list of things to replace, but we're putting a kid through college, right? So, but it does cost us more to register the EV, right? Now, the electric car, right? Now, I'm all for paying my fair share in terms of the taxes. I think that makes perfect sense. But I've gone through and done the calculations on how much I would spend in gas tax if I were driving my car for 10,000 miles, and it works out to about $93, right, in gas tax, right? When I go to register my car, they charge me $200, right? So people who are driving EVs are actually being penalized. They're being overtaxed relative to people that are driving gas cars. And so that's something that needs to be fixed, right? The other question was the drop in sales. Yeah, the drop in sales is hogwash, right? We're now at, globally, we're at 20% of EV growth. There was a 50% increase in growth from the year before to this year. The US is about 16%, and the sales volumes continue to grow. What they were really saying was they didn't grow as fast as we had hoped they would grow, right? It's not that they grew slower, but they were hoping that, you know, they would see a much bigger increase. And as I mentioned, if you compare alternative fuel vehicles in Ohio, there are 3 EVs sold for every hybrid that's being sold right now. So EVs are where people are going. It's what they want. And when Ford made those announcements about those changes and stuff, and saying that we don't see that happening, Hyundai Motor Group turned around and said, we don't know what you're talking about. We're building new factories in Mexico to sell to South America and to the US if they'll let us bring them in here. And we're converting over our factories in order to increase the rate at which we're growing our EVs. So not everybody agrees on that.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I'm going to ask you to draw our Rotabuck winner here. We have an $8 jackpot today.
Right. So the winning number today, get your tickets out, is 614010. All right, we have a winner. Come on up.
Jay. Thank you. All right, Jay, let's see if your luck continues. We've got $161 in the big pot. So see if you can get that special marble. Oh, you were right next to it. All right, and with that, I guess we're done for the day. Board meeting, don't forget, and get out there, make it a good day, everybody. Thanks to all of our guests